Good afternoon, folks. I'm Robert Craig Thompson, or Robert Craig Thompson, as I'm known. And I'd like to thank each and every one of y'all for coming today. Bigger crowd than I expected, but it's nice to see so many familiar faces. And I'd like to also thank you on behalf of the Madison County Public Library and the Berea Arts Council. And today we're going to have a little questions and answers, PowerPoint, a little demonstrating, and answering as many questions as you guys can throw at me. And so I thought I'd start by just giving you a little bit of information about myself. Come on in. I'm just one of the local, well, I am one of the local craftspeople, one of many here in Berea, and proud to be a craftsperson in Berea with the support that we have from the town and from the different organizations and craft guilds. So I got to give a shout out to those folks as well. About me, I've been in Berea for about 30 years, and I went to Eastern Kentucky University where I was kind of undecided about what I wanted to do. Found myself roaming through the art department and coming upon the lost art of wax casting with Sarah Capps at the art department. And fire, molten metal, hot stuff. How could you not be enthralled by that? Well, come on in. So I went to school at Eastern. I didn't graduate. I took off with a folk band and started traveling the country. That was my first, formal education to life, was traveling with the band. And I started making jewelry out of guitar strings that Mitch would take off of his guitar and give those away as little pins and things. But got back off the road, settled in Berea, and started working at Cardinal Grocery, and also doing some work at Churchill Weavers. They were the first folks to kind of pick me up and encourage me to do my work. I had spent, I guess, about 2 years working at Cardinal Grocery before I actually got my own studio and stuff set up. But in the meantime, I worked with a number of different people in town doing collaborative work, and I don't know if anybody knows Albert Mooney, but Albert was really good in my formal education. I was down in Old Town with him working in the old jail for several years as well after I left the Cardinal Grocery and set up my own studio at home. And once I worked there for a while and got established that way, I was looking for my own gallery space, and I happened upon Dinah Tyree in Old Town, and Dinah took me in and gave me my first year rent free, and gave me a whole lot of encouragement and kind of taught me the ropes of the craft industry, which was really booming at that time. So I got settled in Old Town and started crafting, and it's been a whirlwind ever since then. I'm a traditional craftsperson. I don't use a lot of heavy equipment or automated equipment. You see pretty much everything here is a hand tool, and that's how I produce my work from start to finish. It's labor intensive. I enjoy it, and that's why I do it, and I like the challenge of doing it. I work with a lot of, I'm a fabricator and of metal. So what I basically do is take flat sheet and stock. So a lot of my work is comprised of copper, bronze, and silver, and when I get it, it comes in flat sheets, or it will come in different types of wire and gauges of wire. And so everything is cut and crafted from that, using a variety of different hand tools. And my specialty happens to be, or at least I think it is doing the cut and pierce work, drawing out designs. and getting those onto metal, then drilling and cutting. But what I'd like to do is pass around a little bit of my work while I'm talking to you so y'all can see it and get an idea of what's going on with some of the work that I'm talking about. And I'll start with one of these little pendants. These are pierced work where I drill through, I'll draw something, drill through, and then hand cut with a lot of magnification. And this is what one looks like when it's just being started, when I've drawn my design on and I've partially cut. And so I set the stone in there so you can kind of hold it up and see that there's light passing through. And some of these pierced pieces, and I go do those from very tiny like this one to medium size and up to larger pieces. But it's really quite something to get in there and start cutting, and it's time consuming, but the result is it can't be, you know, achieved any other way than with hand and eye coordination. And let's see, while y'all pass those around, I thought that I wanted to give y'all a little idea. Now, if y'all have any questions at all, just feel free to ask, because that would help me through this situation. And as far as how I design and create the things that I do, I tend to be inspired by nature. I also spend a lot of time doodling and sketching on the metal, as far as drawing out designs and erasing them. I think my most often used piece of equipment is my eraser, because I'm never happy with the way it goes at first. But, and I've got things laid out up here, and I'll let y'all kind of check and walk around and look at these things. And at some point, I'd like to do a little demoing for you, and then also, if somebody's interested in doing some hammering or giving an attempt at doing some cutting, I'm more than welcome to have somebody come up here and experience that as well. It seems like what, oh, here's another one of those finished pieces that I can pass around. Get an idea. I was doing a lot of just pierced work where it was only single layer, and I wanted to add more depth. So what I would do is I started thinking about using stones as the backdrops, just to add a lot of depth and interest to the pieces. And since I've been doing those, they've been probably some of my most popular pieces that I've been doing. I can't seem to keep those around when I'm producing them. So that's a, yes, that's good. So, and I thought that I might also pass this around, and then I can kind of explain the techniques on some of these, because I use a variety of different techniques, and that would help me to explain some of these tools. And please, if anybody does have any questions, just feel free to ask them. I don't have any problems answering questions.
You don't mold anything, it's all hammering and cutting?
Yeah, I have done a few pieces where I have actually cut and done the piece and then made a mold and cast it. I did a pin for the Kentucky horse park as a piece that they gave to volunteers and to dignitaries that visited, and they actually gave the first piece to Princess Anne when she came to visit and open the show. I think that was in 2003, which was a big feather in my cap.
Yeah.
But and you know that I do a whole lot of ginkgo leaves, and basically the ginkgo leaves that I do start out with a process of cutting and piercing. And so what I do is you can see I've cut out a whole bunch of blanks already, and then I've got some more on here as well, ready to be cut. And it's also available if somebody else wants to try and give it a try. But I use a variety of saw blades. This is my saw frame, my saw blade. And these are about the thickness of a horse hair. And I'll drill through, feed my blade through, and then hand cut all the pieces of the design. So that little tiny tree that you're looking at was cut with this and the blade that's on here. And that is about a 6/0, which probably doesn't mean anything to you folks, but that's pretty fine. So, and let's move over.
Bobby, how many, that tree, how many layers in that of silver are there that you?
On the little tiny blue one or the other one, there's 2 layers on there. And that's a way to increase the depth on the piece. So I'll cut out and do the trees in the foreground, and then I'll lay that, another piece of blank metal behind that piece. And I'll actually glue that into place so it'll stay in the place. And then I'll draw the mountains behind that first layer, and then I will drill through and cut out that second layer. Then I'll heat the piece back up and separate the piece that I glued in. Then clean, do a little bit of engraving to accentuate mountains and sometimes clouds and things like that. Then when I set the piece, I'll put that second layer in, and then I'll put the stone in, and then set the stone to hold the other piece in place, which keeps it all tightened together. So.
That's interesting, it's only 2 layers because it looks like more than that.
And in some cases I'll do, and the stone adds interest to it as well. But I also do 3 and 4 layers, which can be really something to have to try to get into. Hi there, folks. Just come on in.
Oh, hello, whoever you are.
I'm Bob Craig Thompson.
Great to meet you.
It's nice to meet you folks too.
You know, soon.
I do indeed.
You guys
You sure can. Good. We're all friends. One of the nicest things about doing this is that I know everybody. I thought this was going to be tough until I started.
Strictly local folks.
Thank you. Y'all did miss the pass around part, but you've seen most everything I've made. Alright, so I do a whole lot of pierced work. That's my specialty in doing the layered pieces. And along with that, I also do a whole lot of hammering and a whole lot of ginkgo making. And in the process of doing that, I spend a lot of time at this little stump just hammering. I try to do it at night so the people that have the place above me don't have to listen to me hammer all day long. And then sometimes I just get to a point where I have to hammer all day long. But I'm going to put y'all through one little course of hammering so y'all can kind of get an idea of what it is that I do. And I won't do a big long piece of hammering. We'll just make this quick so y'all get an idea. And I got plenty of blanks if anybody else wants to give it a try.
What's that little figure on top of your tools?
It's me. It's a little Buddha. And what I discovered is I often take tools that that aren't meant to be used for something and use it anyway. I guess that's not breaking the rules. These are little riveting hammers for doing rivets. And I also, so I kind of polished the opposite edge and made it a little bit more of a knife edge. And then I can use these little hammers as my way of getting in here and creating those vein lines in the leaves. And it's just a matter of, let me know if this gets on anybody's nerves. I really don't care. And I think now I understand why I have a problem with tinnitus. But I do put on some earplugs and y'all probably have the idea now. And I can pass this around too. It's kind of like show and tell. I've been enjoying this. All right. So I'll pass a couple of these around so you can see how it's hammered on one side and how it's not hammered on the other. Let y'all start this around.
So does the piece get bigger as you hammer it?
As you hammer the piece, the metal starts to spread and starts to undulate a little bit. It also tends to get work hardened, so you have to heat it up, loosen those molecules again before you work it another course. But after the pieces are hammered, then I'll go back and use hand tools to add a little bit of life to the piece by giving a few little curls and bends in the leaves. Make those pop out and give just a little bit more interest. And it's not that difficult once you just let the tools do the work for you. So pretty much, in just a few minutes, you can end up with your basic ginkgo leaf, ready to either wire on a bead or just put on an ear wire and call it done at that point. And I use a lot of copper, and it started because we had a real bad tornado down in Old Town at one point that just ripped the heck out of everything. And I found myself going around scrounging up all the copper I could find, and next thing I knew, I was using that copper and recycling it. And plus, I like the warmth and the malleability of the copper. It's a little softer and more forgiving, and it's got a great ductability. It can be drawn out, it can be cut, it can be folded and riveted, and you can do a lot to it without really hurting it, as long as you heat it up a little bit. But it takes a lot of manipulation, which is really good. One of the things I think that really made a big change in my design was visiting artists to Japan, and that started about 25 or 6 years ago, going to visit our sister city region. A little town called Kiyosato in the Yamanashi Prefecture. And it's a beautiful place. We set up and we do craft fairs with a view of Mount Fuji in the distance. And it's like waking up in National Geographic that first morning when you walk out onto the field. And it's amazing how I never thought that my craft would take me places. I didn't think it would, definitely didn't think it would take me to Japan 22 times. Which really elevated my thought of like, hey, this is really, can take you someplace. And so, and also a lot of the Asian influence that I found. I've always been fascinated with Japan, probably because of all the Japanese martial arts movies I watched as a kid. But once I got there, I discovered a whole lot more, like art and sushi. So, and that was really good. But with those years of travel, I got to experience a lot of different people and a lot of different influences by seeing other people's artwork. The work the Japanese folks were doing, the metal work and the woodwork and the ceramics, it was all, had just a little bit different action in it than what I was used to seeing. Let's see. I guess I could pass the crown around, but I'm afraid somebody might take it. There will be photo ops with the crown later on if anybody wants to selfie with the crown. We won't take that back.
I just want to let you know, I know you don't do Facebook and stuff, but I posted a picture of that on there. It's amazing. You just got such rave reviews. That crap of the pieces that you had, people were just amazed at that particular piece. I mean, the comments were just incredible. Just people coming out of the woodwork to comment on that crowd.
Well,
It was a
that's
pretty
awesome.
amazing piece. But it has that long, since you'll never see it, so.
Well, it's, as of late, I've just been kind of a little bit bored with what I've been doing. You know, you can only make so many earrings and pendants and pins before you start thinking, well, I need to, you know, look for a little bit more encouragement, for, thank you, Cody. And lately, I have been looking at other people's artwork. And I just finished a pen that's actually in the case of a little owl that I just absolutely really like a lot. And it was one of the Japanese artists who'd come, Takahiro, I don't remember his last name, but he was a painter and kind of a folk artist, I think, what I would describe him as. But he brought I was looking at his paintings and he gave me one of his books. And as I was flipping through his book, I saw these images of owls, and they were very whimsical and just charming. And so I wanted to see if I could transcend that from flat to 3D and see what it would look like and how it would, you know, turn out. And I was really pleased. I've actually made like 4 of them at this point. So I'm looking for other alternative designs and inspirations. And so these days, I'm stepping a little bit out of my box, and I thought, okay, tiaras, crowns. I think that after the crown, the next thing is the scepter. So, making the crown jewels of Berea. Offering those.
Are we gonna pose for that?
You can. Yes.
Michelle Hayden told me that the ginkgo was the only tree to survive the bombing at Hiroshima.
Wow.
So to me, it's kind of fitting with all of your influence from Japan.
Oh, cool. Well, I appreciate that.
What about doing chastity belts?
For men.
Your wife needs one.
Exclamations.
Now, I've got a lot of different tools up here, and on that ginkgo pendant that was being passed around that has the leaves and the, oh, you have that piece. Thank you. All the little flowers and things on there are done with the saw work, and they're all cut out one at a time. And then these little flowers that are on here, this has a number of different techniques. It's got the piercing, the hammering, the forming, and then I've got the silver wire that has been filed and shaped. But all these little flowers are first hand cut with a jeweler's saw. And then I have a whole series of little tiny micro stamps that I've made out of dental tools. And so I will take little tiny stamps that I can hardly even see, and I'll stamp the flowers first. And once I've stamped them, and I know you can't really see these things, so once again, I will be passing things around, hands-on experience. And since I've got a lot of these, I'll put one in each row, and that way it'll be easy for folks to kind of get an idea. If I put on my glasses, make sure I'm not handing y'all anything really sharp. All right, these are good. And I make a lot of my own tools. A lot of times when I'm designing something, if I don't have what I need, then I'll just go and take a little piece of steel and start filing and sanding until I get what I want. And then I'll heat treat it so I can stamp it and knock it into the metal. But you can see right there how those little tiny flowers, and then I'll go through and stamp them with little stamps to make them have those little patterns and designs on them.
Do you ever work with platinum or titanium?
I've not worked with titanium, but I have worked with a little bit of platinum, and I'll never do it again. It's just such, it takes so much heat, and it's a really hard metal, and it's not one that well, it's just so daggone expensive. And I don't know, it's not one of those things that I really find that excites me.
Well, I only ask because I have a daughter whose signature colors are gold and platinum.
That's an expensive daughter.
Couldn't wait to marry her off.
And then I use a variety of these little stamps and tools. You can just pass that little flower and stamp down.
How did you get started, Bobby?
I got started, I went to school at Eastern, and I wandered around. I had no idea of what I was going to do when I went to Eastern. My dad said, go into accounting. I said, you'll be coming to see me in prison, Daddy. There was just no way. Can't really add. But when I was at Eastern, I was roaming around. I told these folks I found the art department and found myself really interested in the lost art of wax casting. And from there, I started taking a lot of different classes, and I got obsessed with metalwork and found myself just spending hours at night in the studio. We'd stay and get locked in the building and get into all kinds of creative mischief. So,
What's the effect of all the detail work on your eyes?
I keep using stronger and stronger optivisors to help me see. At this point, I really should get some real glasses, because everything is a little bit blurry. You folks are looking good though.
Softball
Word up. Oh, goodness.
It's really enhancing. But along with I do with that big leaf. All right. So the riveting part is how I get the flowers attached. And riveting is a matter of taking a piece of metal and hammering it on one end to spread it out just a little bit, a piece of wire, and then feeding it through a hole that you've already drilled, and then cold connecting two pieces of metal without having to use heat or torch. And it's a really good way to, if you've got a number of different things that if you heat back up and they get soft, you don't really want it because they become more fragile and will break. So I'll work harden pieces, and then I will rivet them together using my little rivet hammer or a planishing hammer as well, or not a planishing hammer. That's a riveting hammer too. Chasing hammer. And then I also do a lot of forged work here as well. So you know that I do. I'll forge a lot with square stock and draw it out, hammer it, and then file, sand, heat twist, and solder to create different types of bracelets and other parts of my metal. I like doing sculptural stuff as well. So it's and for me, jewelry for the most part is just sculpture reduced down in size, and to be made into wearable art. And I guess that I created a whole life around making wearable art, and I love it.
Did you study under anyone?
Was lucky enough to have a couple of different professors at Eastern. I had Sarah Capps, and then I had Tim Glotzbach, who came to Eastern later on. But I think that most of my education really came after I got out of school and actually started making a living, and trying to create designs that would last and that were easy to produce and that could be handcrafted without a lot of equipment. And that's what I've basically done, is stayed away from automation. And everything's handcrafted from top to bottom as far as making my own ear wires. And so from top to bottom.
So the drill that you use, Bobby Craig, is that one of those, what does it look like?
I actually have what you call as a flex shaft. And it looks like one of those things that a dentist has hanging in his in his office. And I'll have that flexible flex shaft, and then I'll just steady my hands, and then I'll drill through. And I'd say that that's probably some of the most tedious stuff. And I'll put down metal, I'll draw my designs out, and then I'll put tape over top so I don't smear them. I learned that the hard way. You'll draw out a bunch of designs, and then you'll do all your holes, and then you'll start holding it, and you'll start cutting. Then you'll look back and you've got a bunch of holes but no designs or drawings left, and you just freak out. But you can hold this up and you'll see that these have been drilled, and these little designs are drawn on, so you'll get an idea of what it is. And another little secret that I have that I haven't shared with y'all is that when I'm cutting out these earrings and pieces, I glue two pieces of metal together. And the silver that she's looking at right now, those are two silver sheets that are 24 gauge sterling silver. And I'll glue them together with super glue, and then I'll sometimes make little metal tabs and fold those over on top so that the sheets of metal don't separate. And then I will draw my designs on and start cutting.
Is that your own idea?
Well, that was one way I came up, because that gives you a mirror image. So when those are separated and on the inside, it's a great way to not have to recut everything twice.
Sure.
And those do look pretty much identical, as long as you use the pieces that are faced on the inside, because when you're cutting on the outside and you're using your saw frame, you can tend to shift yourself without really realizing it. So when you go to separate them, the backside on each will be really different. There'll be one that the lines are really smooth, and the other side they're a little bit wacky. But where they're the closest together on the inside is where they'll now.
What do you do with the scraps of metal?
Well,
There's not much scrap. I mean, look at, you
I
almost,
try not to have as
you
much
really
scrap,
use a
but
lot of
I've
that.
got boxes of scrap. And I always laugh because people are like, well, you got some cool jewelry. I was like, well, I wear all the scrap box jewelry. So I sell the good stuff.
Can you melt it, or?
I can, but I'm thinking this might be my retirement.
Okay.
I think I've got silver from 20 years ago. So,
My dad worked in the dental lab at the Navy and during World War II, and he pocketed all the scraps and sold them. Made my mother ring out. But yeah, they were pretty bad. I know.
Since I've been talking a lot, I think it might be fun if we let somebody give a little try at hammering. Wouldn't you like to try, Dave?
You know.
Oh, come on. Anybody want
Your
to try?
hand is not big enough.
If anybody want to hammer a bean
You go too slow.
Nobody wants to try their hand-eye coordination and dexterity. All right, I won't force you.
I'd like to see you do a little bit of cutting if you have.
I can do a little bit of cutting. I'll be glad to cut out.
You need that piece back?
How about if I cut out that hummingbird that's on there? I'm coming to you. Thank
You
you.
do any flamingos?
No, I don't do any flamingos.
Yeah.
Flamingo.
All right.
Take it easy now, dude.
Y'all pass that piece of metal back. Sorry, kids.
I know.
Had you done any kind of artwork as a younger person before you went to EKU, drawing?
You know, I did. I don't want to say I was a crafty kid, but seems like I was always, this morning at 4 o'clock when I was laying in bed worried about this, I was thinking, when did you really start making jewelry? And I realized it was in high school, because I I got into that, well, I'll date myself right now, it was in the 70s when macrame was really
Oh, I
popular.
knew he was gonna say that.
And I made more macrame jewelry than anybody probably should have. And sold that at high school. Then I was hammering out little copper bracelets and things like that on a polished concrete floor in the basement. Two of them got me using his hammers. But, if you have a question, George, or
I was
comment?
wondering if you're doing roach clips.
I made a few of those when I was in high school, so no doubt.
Tell you something.
All right, I'm gonna throw on my Optivisor. I'll cut out one of these hummingbirds and then I'll just pass it right back to you. Make sure I've got a good blade. Last thing I wanna do is break something while I'm sitting here talking to y'all. And I'd say probably the most difficult part of getting these things done is doing the drilling. Because I drill freehand, and those drills are really, really tiny. And they'll break off right in the middle of your metal. And then you got a problem. Put a hole right through his head. And I'll make this look kind of simple for sure.
Are you sawing or filing?
I am sawing. But I have got a
Looks like you're
saw blade.
filing.
But I've got a saw blade that is actually kind of a little bit sluggish. And you'll get that sometimes. So I'm going to open up another pack. Sometimes they don't always heat treat these steel blades the best they could.
Sledgehammers.
Yeah, like, you want a huge
Chainsaws.
necklace? You want a huge necklace, we can talk. Forget about it.
All right. Good. That's quicker now. But it's hard to believe that I've been doing this for about 32 years.
Amazing.
All right. Now we're in business, kids. And all you have to do is just be steady and not get in too big of a hurry or,
Does your neck ever hurt?
well, when I'm at my bench, I don't have to bend quite so much. But yeah, I do have a neck ache every now and then. I'm sure your job had its hazards as well.
Not that I can recall.
All right. We just about have one hummingbird brave enough to want to do this.
Well, we might do it, but that would be a terrible waste of your metal.
Exactly.
So all I did was just cut out that little hummingbird. You can see on the back side how it's cut out.
So Bobby, people who like cheat on this, do they have like those, like, I'm thinking woodworking, people who work with their hands and then all of a sudden you see a guy who's got like a laser thing
Yeah.
and they just get it done quick.
There's a number of folks that have automated engraving machines that will have a real fine engraver that will go around a design over and over and over until it pierces it and drops it out. But you can really tell because the edges look like they've been chewed by a little tiny rat.
Oh, I imagine that's probably part of what you have to do at your shop is people need to see what you're doing so they'll understand why yours is so much more than somebody who used a quicker method.
Well, often my work is cheaper than those people that use it.
Really? Wow.
That's why I
It
have an
shouldn't be.
outhouse. I must be enjoying myself, you know.
Yeah.
So, life is good, and even in the woods, using an outhouse. And you can see the design drawn out on the other side, so you'll know.
So I can tell what it is.
So,
Is that going to be a standalone piece, or are you gonna use it,
that'll be
put
a,
it on something?
that'll be a pair of earrings, and I'll probably put a drop of a pearl or a lapis off the bottom. I often like to incorporate semi-precious stones on the jewelry. A lot of people like a little bling and flash. So, if I can give it to them, I do. So, for sure. But in all the years of making jewelry, I think the biggest gratification is actually making something for somebody and not them just loving it, but it really suiting them, it being just the perfect piece, and that happens a lot with me. I'm really pleased to say I've not had any returns, which is.
Do you accept returns?
Don't be the first. I was gonna say, don't be the first.
So on the stones that you back it with, do you buy those already?
I actually, one of the reasons we're doing this talk today is because next Sunday, when I was supposed to be here, I'll actually be in North Carolina at a major gem and mineral show, and I'll be picking up more stones. I like to pick up the different types of turquoise. We'll have some Tibetan and some Nepalese turquoise. Lots of lapis, that seems to be a stone that I like, and then I'll pick up a lot of moss agates and some different things. I like using the translucent stones behind the trees and the landscapes that I create, just because when you turn them around they have that really nice glow. And I'll often pick up and study these stones and when I'm at the show, just to see if I can optimize what is revealed on the back of the stone and utilize that as part of my backdrop. So I put a lot of thought into this.
So then you size the pattern for the stone.
What was that?
You size the pattern for the stone.
Yeah, and here's a couple of examples. Well, I passed one around, but like I drew this little tree out this morning, and it'll be for this piece of turquoise. Although somebody read an article to me this morning that said turquoise was out in fashion, but I didn't find out till this morning.
I think they're talking about that howlite turquoise, and it's
okay.
real at all.
No, it's
But yeah, looking for those stones and figuring out how to use them and get the best out of those. Because sometimes you can find mountain ranges and clouds and all kinds of really interesting imagery in the stones themselves. And if I have a stone that's really nice on the front that I really like, and the backside is not interesting, or it's not a polished backside, then I'll take something like a regular sheet of silver and put it to back the pendant, or I'll take a mother of pearl and I'll sand and polish it and have like a really nice iridescence and put that behind the stone in place of the back of that stone to give the piece a whole lot more life. So, for sure.
And where's your shop located? Plug in here.
Well, my shop is on the College Square, and I have a great partner in Teresa Cole. And then we have another artist who's in the gallery with us as well, Amy Lewis. So we'll have fine ceramics, really great paintings, and just kick-ass jewelry. And we'll try our best to meet all of your craft needs if we can. Has anybody got any questions they'd like to ask?
Get a dating service for older women and we'll be perfect.
The article in the Register mentioned something about Germany. What was the connection with that?
My dad was in the military, so I started traveling young. I was born in Heidelberg, and then my dad did 3 more tours in Germany after that, so we made several more trips back. But I'm one of 6 kids, Army kids, and my dad just drug us all over. And but I spent most of my time in Kentucky, I'd say.
This might seem like a stupid question, but do you have dual citizenship if you're in the
No, but I've
military?
been really considering it these days.
That's what I'm thinking.
I do have a German birth certificate.
There you go. That should open one door.
Did any of your siblings become artistic? Did they follow some kind of path?
You know, my dad was very creative and artistic, and he used to draw a lot. He didn't do it a whole lot for other people, but he could just sketch a horse, no problem. And it wasn't anything that he pursued. He did woodworking and a variety of things. It seems like I was the only one of his kids that picked it up and went on. I've got a number of, 5 other siblings, and one's a nurse, one works for Ditch Witch, and one delivers chips. So there's a variety of us out here. I'm the only one trying to make a living making crafts and art, so for sure.
Do you do the learn shops or try to pass on training and stuff too?
I've not done the learn shops, and I've been encouraged to do the learn shops. Maybe I'll do that since I've had such a nice introduction to people. But yeah, I've considered it. I'm just kind of, and I've actually, the last couple of years have been buying in extra sets of tools, like hand tools, just so I can start thinking in terms of doing some small classes. And because having 3 or 4 people would be a really good sized class. Not too many
You don't
people.
want
I
to.
mean, and maybe those folks might be more interested in trying this. Since you guys are cowards.
It's a big audience.
To get the coloring like on the ground, is that just with heat?
That was with heat, and
If you need somebody to do it, I'll do it.
all right. With the crown, I'd had it just buffed up really high polish with my rouge finishing polish, and it was just shiny and bright, and I almost felt like it was just a little bit offensive. It was just too shiny for the form. So I decided I would take a chance and heat treat it. And so what I did was I took my torch, and when you heat treat something, all you do is expose it to a flame and wait for the oxidation to occur because of the air. And you'll wait and see certain colors kind of flash and dance on the surface, and you'll pull that torch back and you'll wait a second to see what kind of color finally does come up. And you can get the most beautiful reds and burgundies and blues and greens. But it's often hard to try and get consistency all the way around. But I wasn't really worried about trying to get consistency. It's just a little bit more interest and a little bit of color and something go on in there. And I think probably that the responses that you got on Facebook when they posted it were probably because of the color and the flashing that occurred on there. So makes me want to flash everything.
And also for the desire of people who want to have crowns, you know.
Yes,
with
indeed.
yellows.
Well, I think I might have a little, niche here. I can start making bridal crowns and, and I know some
Movie
people.
star crowns. Brides don't pay, movie stars.
I know some people have pets. They probably pay thousands of dollars.
Then on the finished product, like, once you got the color, do you coat it with something?
You can. I thought that I would let this just be a living patina at this point, because passing it around and handling it with the oil and exposure, it'll get darker,
Yeah.
and eventually it will probably, turn green if I don't do anything at all to it. But I think what I'll do is I'll wait, probably heat treat it again, and then seal it at some point, just so the colors will stay, and then I can just put it on display, and that way anytime.
What do you see? Like,
I'll use some sort of spray sealer that you can pick up. I mean, there are different types of lacquers that you can put on. The only problem with that is that if you lacquer something and you wear it a lot and it flakes off, then the oxidation will occur and you'll end up with a spotty thing. So another way that you can do it is to use like a rub-on wax, which will and then buff it a little bit, and that will also hold the color on there for a while, but not like the sealing with the spray seal.
So on my copper jewelry,
Mm-hmm.
will it eventually turn green?
It can if it lays in
The
the drawer
tiara?
long enough.
The tiara thing?
Mm-hmm. Or if it's in kind of a more of a moisture situation, if there's a lot of humidity or dampness. But generally things will tend to just age and turn like a darker brown. But if there's
Once I
moisture,
bring it in, have you polish it?
yes, which you've got a lifetime of free polishing.
There you go.
No problem, Carla. And actually, I need to thank Carla because most of the jewelry that is in the case is Carla's personal collection. I will not give you her home address.
It's a tiara, Kent, Indiana, commissioned for my 80th birthday.
Very nice.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it was a good project to work on. It was hard for me to keep it secret whenever I see it.
You did.
But she has everything ginkgo, that's for sure. Now, is there anything I can answer as far as tool questions or materials, sourcing?
I'm really fascinated with the way you put the little flowers on.
Yeah, that's the riveting process
Yeah.
that I kind of got into and then got distracted from. But you can see where they were cold attached. This is the
Oh, I
back of the
see.
rivets.
Uh-huh.
And I'll hold those flowers in place and then use my chasing hammer and a riveting hammer, and I will rivet it on the front, put it down on that hard surface, and then back here hammer it on the back side to flatten that rivet out, to finish it out and make it permanently attached.
And then do you have to buff it in any way?
Yeah, after everything has been put together, I'll try to, as I'm crafting and creating, I like to buff during the different stages, just to make sure that I don't have a bunch of scratches or fire scale. Fire scale is something that happens to sterling silver when you heat it, because sterling silver has a small percentage of copper in it. When you heat it, the molecules of the copper tend to come to the surface. And it can cause like this dark clouding in the silver surface when you buff it up. And sometimes you can buff something and it'll look really pretty, and then as it starts to tarnish a little bit, that copper will tarnish faster than the silver will. And so you'll have dark spots or yellow spots in your work. So I'll buff and sand between different courses in the production of the piece. Then when I finally put it together and it's ready for its final buffing, I don't have to worry about getting in there in those deep places, especially if I've layered and have get back in and around some of these places can be difficult. And then when you go in and try and use a little buffing wheel or something, you can actually take out part of your design because the copper is soft and it can buff away fairly easily.
But the dark gives it a depth that.
It does. I really like patinas because they will just make things pop, and you can see your patterns and designs a lot faster and easier. So when people come in and bring me jewelry, they're like, "Can you take all this black off of it?" I'm like, "Why?" You can see all the design elements clearly, and I think that's what. And also, it just adds character. I mean, who wants to look like they got something brand new on all the time? Other than you, Carla. You look good in a shiny crown. Yeah.
Do you have a marker or a signature or something?
I have a diamond tip engraver, and I'll have to be honest. On all the pieces I really like and I'm proud of, I'll put my name in there deep. Because I've had my name sanded out a few times. And then I will, on some of the other pieces that are really quickly produced, I don't really have a mark on some of those. And unfortunately for me, on some of these pendant pieces, like this, there's really no place to actually stamp the piece. So I'm ordering a micro stamp, and I'll be able to stamp like the little bales on top, on the inside.
Wow.
That's a good idea.
That's fine. But I think that these are pretty much signature as far as anybody seeing them. They know who made them.
Yes, absolutely.
You ever combine wood with your metal?
That's a good question, George. I often combine a whole lot of different mediums together in the production of what I do. I've done shard clay pieces in jewelry, and I've done wood. I've used plastics and polymers, a lot of different materials. But I really like the more, for me, I like the wood and the more natural stones and things in the jewelry. Although I went through a period of just trying, everything and seeing what I could recycle and put into a piece of jewelry.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah,
Well,
Really
guys,
appreciate
thanks
it.
for listening to me ramble on.
it was a good ramble.
But it was a big joy for me. I thought this was going to be some sort of a
Thank you.
An ordeal.